You hear the word bunker and you think dirt walls and darkness. You think simple holes dug in mountainsides. What if I told you there are underground cities built into solid rock mountains where nations hide their most powerful weapons and nobody can touch them? That is exactly what Iran built deep beneath its mountains for decades. And for years, that thought felt safe to the people making decisions there. Then one night, everything changed and nobody saw it coming. By the time this ends, you will know exactly what technology the United States used to crack what was supposed to be the most untouchable fortress on Earth, and why this changes everything for every nation that ever thought underground meant safe. Here's why this matters right now. In the past 3 months, intelligence officials from 3 different countries confirmed something remarkable to Reuters and the Washington Post. The precision of a single American capability reached a level that surprised even the people who built it. While most of you were watching headlines about drones and peace talks, this quiet revolution in underground warfare was reshaping the entire strategic map of the Middle East. If you have ever wondered how superpowers actually plan to fight wars in the modern age, this story is the real answer, and it looks nothing like what you see in movies. Let me give you the quick version of who we are talking about. Iran is a country in the Middle East with roughly 80 million people. Its government has been working for years to build what they call a deterrence capability, and that is a fancy way of saying weapons scary enough that other countries will not attack them. The United States is the world's biggest military power and has spent decades trying to manage Iranian influence in the region. Israel sits right next to Iran and considers it an existential threat, which is a way of saying a threat to their actual survival as a nation. The tension between these countries goes back decades and centers on one simple question: who gets to have the biggest weapons in a neighborhood full of countries that do not trust each other? Now think of it like this. Imagine a neighborhood where everyone owns a gun and nobody locks their doors. Then one day, one family builds a vault so strong that nobody can break into it. That family feels safe, right? They store everything valuable in that vault and nobody can touch it. That is essentially what Iran did with its underground nuclear and missile facilities. They built vaults into mountains and felt untouchable. The problem is that vaults only stay untouchable if nobody builds a better drill. This is where it gets interesting. For years, the United States studied what are called hardened underground facilities. These are not simple basements. We are talking about sites buried under hundreds of feet of rock and concrete designed to survive nuclear strikes. The challenge has always been that traditional bombs cannot reach deep enough to destroy what is inside. You can crack the surface, but the facility stays intact and operational. Intelligence reports from the International Institute for Strategic Studies show that Iran built at least 6 major underground missile production and storage sites, according to satellite analysis by Jane's Defense Weekly. And these facilities were spread across different mountain ranges, making them extremely hard to target with conventional weapons. Here is what changed. The United States developed what analysts call penetration capability upgrades, and no, I am not going to explain exactly what those are because that information is classified. But here is what you need to know about the concept. Think about the difference between punching a wall and drilling through it. A punch breaks the surface. A drill actually removes material layer by layer until it reaches what is behind the wall. That is the difference between older bunker buster weapons and what the United States now has. The old weapons created damage on the surface and hoped the shockwave did enough harm. The new approach goes straight through everything above it and delivers payload exactly where it needs to go. But here's where it gets really interesting, because what happened next is something almost nobody predicted. Iran did not just sit back after learning about these new capabilities. According to reporting by the New York Times and statements from Iranian military officials translated by Reuters, Iran actually accelerated construction on facilities they thought were already hidden. And this is the part nobody is talking about. They moved operations deeper into mountains that were previously considered too difficult to use. They relocated equipment that had been sitting in older sites. They essentially admitted with their actions that the old thinking about underground safety no longer applies. This ripple goes way beyond Iran. Think about what this means for every country that has built underground facilities as their main survival strategy. North Korea has spent decades burrowing into mountains for its nuclear program. Russian military doctrine relies heavily on underground command centers and storage facilities. Syria has used underground tunnels and bunkers as a core part of its defense strategy for years. If the fundamental assumption that underground equals safe is no longer true, then every military planning document in every country with underground facilities needs to be rewritten from scratch. This is not just about Iran. This is about how every nation on Earth thinks about protecting its most valuable military assets. Now, I want to be fair here because this is important. Some military analysts, including researchers at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, have raised legitimate questions about whether the technology being discussed is actually as effective as reports suggest. Intelligence is often exaggerated by people who want certain outcomes. Countries also have a long history of claiming capabilities they do not fully have to make their enemies hesitate. The truth is that nobody outside classified discussions truly knows how well these weapons work against the deepest and most fortified sites. There is also the practical problem that destroying a facility does not destroy the knowledge behind it. Iran could lose a bunker and still know exactly how to build another one somewhere else. So the real question is not just can you destroy these sites, but does destroying them actually change anything strategically? So what happens next? Here is what real analysts are actually discussing behind closed doors. Scenario 1, things continue as they are. The United States has the capability but does not use it because using it would trigger a massive escalation that nobody wants. Iran knows the capability exists, so they do not push boundaries too hard and everyone maintains a tense but stable standoff. That is the optimistic scenario, and honestly, it is probably the most likely one for now. Scenario 2, the capability forces a diplomatic breakthrough. Iran agrees to serious limits on its nuclear program, not because they want to, but because keeping the program becomes too risky when the sites can be destroyed. This is what some officials at the State Department and European diplomatic services are quietly hoping for. Scenario 3, things get worse before they get better. A regional conflict starts and one side decides to use these new capabilities, and suddenly you have an escalation spiral that nobody planned for and nobody can stop. Think about what this actually means for real people on the ground. When military planners talk about underground facilities, they are talking about places where weapons are made and stored. Those weapons could be conventional missiles or they could be something more dangerous. When those facilities are threatened or destroyed, the people who live in the surrounding areas become part of a much bigger equation. Families in Tehran and Jerusalem and Washington and Moscow all have children who do not want to grow up in a world where these decisions are made by algorithms and satellites. The language of strategic deterrence sounds clean and technical until you remember that underneath every calculation is a human being who just wants to live without fear. So here is my question for you, and I genuinely want to hear what you think in the comments. When one country develops the ability to reach anywhere on Earth, does that make the world more stable because nobody can hide from consequences? Or does it make the world more dangerous because it removes the safety valves that kept previous conflicts contained? There is no obvious right answer, and the people with the most information still disagree about it. In the next video, we are going to look at what North Korea learned when they watched what happened to Iran and why their response to these developments might be the most consequential thing happening in global security right now.